My name is Adil, and I'm 20 years old. Like any other college student, my life was a routine of classes, assignments, and hanging out with friends. I wasn't someone who stood out. I was average, blending into the crowd. Life felt predictable, even a little dull at times. But all of that changed the day she walked into the lecture hall. Her name was Miss Zoya, the new literature professor. She was unlike anyone I had ever seen before. Graceful, confident, and strikingly beautiful, she carried an aura that captivated everyone the moment she entered the room. Her long black hair fell neatly over her shoulders, and her eyes, deep, thoughtful, and mysterious, seemed to hold secrets that no one could guess. The first time I saw her, my heart skipped a beat. I didn't know what was happening to me, but something about her presence shook me. It wasn't just her beauty. It was the way she carried herself, the way her voice resonated with warmth and intelligence. As the weeks went by, I found myself looking forward to her classes more than anything else. She taught with passion, her words weaving stories that brought literature to life. The way she spoke about love, heartbreak, and the human condition made it impossible not to be drawn to her. One day, as she explained a poem about unspoken love, I couldn't help but feel like she was speaking directly to me. Her voice softened, her gaze sweeping across the room. For a brief second, I thought our eyes met and my breath caught, but I quickly dismissed the thought. What was I thinking? She was my teacher, a brilliant, accomplished woman, and I was just a student. It wasn't long before I started noticing small moments that felt special, even if they might have meant nothing to her. One afternoon, I stayed back after class to ask her a question about an assignment. The room was quiet, and I was nervous as I approached her desk. "Miss Zoya," I began, my voice shaky. She looked up from her notes and smiled. "Yes, Adil?" Hearing her say my name felt like music. I stumbled through my question, trying to focus on her words instead of how close she was. She explained patiently, her voice calm and kind, and for those few minutes, it felt like the world had disappeared. As I left the room, I couldn't stop replaying the moment in my head. It was such a small interaction, but it meant everything to me. The more I saw her, the more I realized how deeply I was falling for her. It scared me. This wasn't just a crush. It was something far more intense, something I couldn't control. Late at night, I would lie awake, wondering what she thought of me. Did I even exist in her world beyond being just another student? My friends began to notice that I was distracted during conversations. "Say hi, dear. What's going on with you?" My best friend Samir asked one day, "You've been acting weird lately." I shrugged, not ready to share the truth. "Just a lot of assignments," I lied. But inside, I was a storm of emotions. One rainy afternoon, as I was walking toward the library, I saw her sitting alone in the college courtyard under a large tree. The rain had stopped, but the ground was still damp, and she was looking through a book, lost in her world. I hesitated for a moment, then gathered the courage to approach her. "Miss Zoya," I said softly. She looked up, surprised but not annoyed. "Adil," she said, smiling. "What brings you here?" "I just saw you sitting here and thought I'd say hello," I replied, feeling my cheeks flush. She closed her book and gestured to the bench beside her. "Join me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I sat down, trying to appear calm, though my heart was racing. For the next half hour, we talked, not as teacher and student, but as two people sharing a conversation. She told me about her love for literature, her dreams of writing a book someday, and the challenges of being in a new city. I listened intently, hanging on to every word. When I shared my own thoughts about her favorite novel, she seemed impressed. "You have a way with words, Adil," she said, her eyes lighting up. It was the first time I felt like she saw me, not just as a student, but as a person. From that day on, something shifted. Though nothing inappropriate ever happened, there was a warmth in her smile when she saw me. I found myself participating more in her classes, eager to hear her thoughts and perhaps impress her in small ways. But with every moment of connection, the conflict inside me grew. Was I imagining things? Was I reading too much into her kindness? I knew I couldn't tell anyone about how I felt. It was too risky, too complicated. But the feelings refused to go away, no matter how hard I tried to suppress them. One evening, as I sat in my room, staring at an unfinished assignment, my phone buzzed. It was an email from Miss Zoya. Adele, I noticed your recent essay was exceptionally well written. Would you like to discuss it further? Perhaps we can arrange a time to meet after class. Let me know what works for you." I stared at the screen, my heart pounding. What did this mean? Was it just a professional compliment, or was there something more? I quickly replied, agreeing to meet her after class the next day. That night, I barely slept. My mind was filled with possibilities, each one more confusing than the last. I sat at my desk, staring at the email I had sent to Adil. It wasn't just another email. It felt heavier somehow. The words seemed innocent enough, but deep down I knew the weight they carried. Adil, there was something about him. He wasn't like the other students in my class. While most of them showed up just for attendance or half-heartedly completed assignments, Adil was different. He listened intently, his eyes reflecting a depth of thought that often took me by surprise. And then there were the moments, those small, fleeting moments where I felt his gaze linger a little longer than necessary. At first, I dismissed it. He was just a curious student, eager to learn. But over time, I began to notice the subtle signs. The way he participated more in my lectures, the way he spoke deeply to his graduates, the nervous energy whenever he spoke to me. I knew, I had known for a while, as a teacher I'd dealt with students who admired me before. It wasn't uncommon, but this this was different. Adil's feelings were clear in the way he looked at me, the way he hung onto every word I said. And while I never encouraged it, I couldn't deny that I felt a strange connection too. But that connection terrified me. I wasn't just his teacher. I was someone who was supposed to guide him, to mentor him. What kind of example would I set if I allowed myself to feel anything beyond professional respect? That evening, I sat in my apartment, the glow of the city lights filtering through the window. I held a cup of tea, but it had long gone cold. My mind was elsewhere, on Adil. "Zoya, you're overthinking this," I muttered to myself. "He's just a student. This is nothing more than a harmless crush." But the more I told myself that, the less convincing it sounded. What if I was wrong? What if his feelings were deeper than I wanted to admit? And what did that mean for me? I thought back to the rainy afternoon in the courtyard, the day we sat together and talked. I had invited him to sit, not because I wanted to encourage anything, but because he seemed genuine. I hadn't seen the harm in a simple conversation. But now I wasn't so sure. The next day, as I walked into the lecture hall, I felt a strange tension in the air. Adil was sitting in his usual spot, his notebook open, his pen tapping nervously against the desk. Our eyes met for a brief moment, and I quickly looked away. I began the lecture, my voice steady as I discussed the themes of unrequited love and classic poetry. But as I spoke, my thoughts drifted. Did Adil see himself in these poems? Was he silently connecting our situation to the words I was saying? When the class ended, I saw him linger by the door. My heart sank. He was waiting for me. "Miss Zoya," he said, his voice softer than usual. "Yes, Adil?" I asked, forcing a professional tone. "I just wanted to thank you for the email. It means a lot to me that you noticed my work," he said, his eyes earnest. I smiled, keeping my composure. "You've been doing exceptional work, Adil. You should be proud of yourself." For a moment, there was silence. He seemed to want to say more, but he hesitated. "Is there something else?" I asked gently. No, that's all," he said, backing away. But as he walked out, I could feel the weight of his unspoken words. That evening, I couldn't focus on anything else. I replayed the conversation in my mind, trying to make sense of my own feelings. Was I being too harsh on myself? Adil was kind, intelligent, and deeply thoughtful. Any teacher would be proud to have a student like him. But there was a fine line between pride and something more, and I couldn't afford to cross it. My role as his teacher came first. Unable to quiet my thoughts, I called my best friend Sarah. She was someone I trusted, someone who had known me long before I became a teacher. "Sarah," I began hesitantly, "what would you do if a student admired you a little too much?" There was a pause on the other end of the line. "You're talking about someone specific, aren't you?" I sighed. "Yes." "Does this student seem serious? Or is it just a crush? I don't know, I admitted, but it feels complicated. He's a brilliant student, and I don't want to hurt him. But at the same time, I can't let this continue. It's not right. Sarah's voice softened. Zoya, you've always been someone who does the right thing, even when it's hard. You need to set boundaries. Be kind but firm. He'll understand. The next day, I resolved to address the situation. Not directly, not yet, but in a way that would make things clear without causing embarrassment. I assigned the class an essay on the complexities of admiration and boundaries in relationships, using literature as the framework. I hoped Adil would see the message without me having to say it outright. When I handed out the assignment, our eyes met briefly. There was no need for words. If you enjoyed this story, please like, subscribe, and share. See you in the next video.